Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Welcome, welcome. Conversations with Niki it is. I'm Niki Seberini and welcome. Fabulous to be with you. Yet another interesting show and another interesting topic coming your way. And Conversations with Niki, hopefully giving you an opportunity to listen to other people's stories and maybe ignite you, maybe get you excited about something, or maybe it's a call to action. And perhaps today's show is going to be that. It's a show about awareness and taking action and being proactive. But first and foremost, let's welcome the syndication listener partners. I would like to welcome Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, 90.3 MC, that's in Plet, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM, and Bay FM. Welcome to all the listeners. Lovely to have you on board, and thank you so much. Please do keep those emails coming. I'm really enjoying hearing from you. So please do visit the website, www.conversationswithniki, which is one word, .co.za, and Niki is spelled Niki, and all the shows are put onto that website, so you can listen to shows from way back when and listening to some of those interesting stories shared. And if you have information or stories that you would like to share with me, please do make contact all via the website. I'm looking very forward to hearing from you. And you can also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Seberini, Seberini, and you can also go to my Facebook page where I put the shows up as well, which is Niki Seberini Talk Show Host. Now, October has been Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And, we have to be so careful because every month there seems to be something. We have to keep ourselves in check that we don't hit a desensitized state where we're not thinking about what we should be thinking about, and we just walk around in our little bubble hoping and praying that we won't be affected by any of these things. But the truth is, we could very well be. Breast cancer is the most common cancer in South Africa, and the statistics on breast cancer amongst women in South Africa is on a continuous rise. There was a study done by Lancet Medical Journal, and they expect a 78% increase in the number of cases reported by 2030, and that's pretty scary. Now, at the moment, South Africa is ranked 50th on the list of countries with the highest cancer prevalence, and in South Africa, it's 1 in every 29 women who will be diagnosed in their lifetime. So we need to sit up, we need to take notice, and we need to be proactive. And that's what this show is all about, being proactive and hearing people's personal stories, listening to the Cancer Association, also listening to a gynecologist, and hopefully at the end of the show, you're not going to be neurotic. Maybe you will be comforted, but maybe there will be a huge call to action, and I'm hoping that that is what's going to happen after the show today. Now, my first guest, well, you've seen her in your lounge or in your bedroom or in your dining room or wherever your television set is. I mean, she has been a part of many theatrical productions, but perhaps you've seen her on SABC3's multi-award-winning soapie Isidingo, and for a few years she was there, and then she went over to Seven de Laan as Geeta McGregor, who's just a bad woman, and she's a cancer survivor, she's a single mom, she's a cat owner, she is a seasoned actress, and in fact she has survived being called the most hated woman in the history of South African television, thanks to her role in Seven de Laan. I would like to welcome Jo Da Silva. Hi, Jo.
Sorry, I can't help but laugh. Hi, Niki. It's lovely to be with you.
Thank you. I know that you're so busy and you've got such a schedule on, so to take time out to share your story is much appreciated, Jo. Thank you.
Not a problem. This is important. We've got to speak about
We
this.
do. But before we get there, how do you survive being the most hated person on television?
With a wonderful sense of humor and realizing that it reflects on people who think that as opposed to on me. Do you know what I mean? It comments on their character to think that is who I could be in real life.
And
rather
a
than
testament
commenting on my character.
and a testament to your outstanding acting, that they can't differentiate you from the character.
Yes, I'm afraid some of them can't. There have been some tricky moments in public, but a sense of humor normally gets me through most of them.
Wow, Jo. So, I mean, when you were first offered this role, did you think about that? Did you consider the fact that this was one Mimi?
I knew she was going to be a bad lady, and that excited me artistically because it's a lot more fun to play someone who's really complicated and multidimensional, and it's just more challenging artistically. But I will say that I was naive as to the extent of the demographic of the Sevendelaan footprint and how seriously people take their Sevendelaan and how many people would assault me in public.
Oh, Jo.
It's exactly how many church communities would indeed end up praying for my soul as Gita. I didn't expect that much of a reaction. But she's fabulous. You know, she gets to behave in a way that none of us would dare. She wears something fabulous and says something terrible. And artistically, she's a great challenge. On a moral level, there are times where I do have my head in my hands thinking, oh no, I can't believe this.
And when you take her clothes off and you move away from set, can you peel that character away very easily?
Completely. I mean, Niki, apart from the fact that I'm a pro who's been doing this for 24 years, there is nothing of Gita in me. You know, for Pete's sake, I'm the chairperson of my daughter's parents' association at her school. You know, my biggest concern some days is getting the cupcakes finished on time. There is nothing there. It is just a performance. It is just a performance. So I take her off and hit my running shoes, and my biggest concern is generally getting to my little one on time and spending as much time with her as possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. So listen, Jo, I mean, you were diagnosed with cancer, thyroid cancer.
Indeed.
Perhaps you can just share, I mean, what was the build up to that, and tell us about the diagnosis.
Well, Niki, it's a good part of this message of early detection and prevention being far easier than cure, because I'm at the time of finding out that I did have cancer. My daughter was 8 months old, and that was particularly hard to have this fairly newborn baby. She was prem, so it had been a very difficult time with her. I can
imagine.
And every time I went to a doctor with symptoms, I was very much brushed off and told that it was post-baby blues and postnatal depression, and I must really just pull myself together and get over it. And being a first-time mum and being fairly young, I was 28 at the time, I listened to them. You know, and I sort of gave myself several good talkings to. And yes, because she'd been prem, she was feeding on demand. She clearly wasn't sleeping through the night. So I kept putting down all my symptoms to, well, this is what it must be. It's exhaustion with a newborn baby who's prem. However, as the weeks progressed into months, and I now had an 8-month-old baby, and I also knew that I did not have postnatal depression. I was overjoyed. This was a fertility child. This was my miracle come true.
Right.
I knew I wasn't depressed about being a mum, but I was continually exhausted. I was on an emotional roller coaster constantly. I would wake up more tired than when I went to sleep. I had very little tolerance, very little patience, and really the hormones were completely out of control. And it was eventually a standard visit to a GP. I tried a new GP. I'd gone through about 4 doctors who all told me, pull yourself together. And she listened to everything I had to say and said to me, well, there's absolutely no reason for you to be this tired. My days look far longer than yours is. Let's do a quick physical.
At last?
Yes, well, at last, a simple, straightforward physical from top to bottom. So instead of writing off my concerns, she did her job, which is a straightforward physical. And the very first thing she did was put her fingers to the glands in my throat to feel if my glands were swollen. And I do remember thinking, why are you doing that? I didn't say my throat was sore. And it was at that point that she said to me, do you know you have 2 lumps in your throat?
You didn't know?
I
hadn't felt?
You know, they weren't big enough to see.
Right.
And obviously once she found them for me and put my fingers on them, they were all I could feel. And they suddenly felt like the biggest things in the universe.
I'm sure.
But until then, even washing my face and washing myself on a daily basis, I hadn't come across them. It is so easy to miss and so easy to not notice. And she immediately discovered them. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of ultrasounds and sonars and eventually nuclear medication, you know, where they do the nuclear radiology with you. And within 48 hours, I was in an operating theater. So
and what was going through your mind this time? And you've got an 8-month-old baby at home.
That was
this is your worst fear realized. I mean,
it was horrific. That is what I couldn't get through. For me, it was so surreal. I couldn't understand that God would answer my prayers and give me this miracle child, only to have me leave her behind when she was 8 months old.
Sure.
And that was a large part of me not being able to accept what was happening. It didn't seem real to me. I kept looking at this baby that was in my arms, thinking, this isn't happening. This is not my life. This is not what I signed up for. This isn't part of what should be happening.
Of course.
I shouldn't be in the risk group for this. I just kept, it was all the standard phases of grief, from rage to denial to bargains with God. All I could think of was my daughter, and I started writing letters to her, trying to imagine every conceivable question she would ever ask of a mother that I would not be able to answer. And started, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of letters that I eventually wrote, which were letters to my daughter, to try and fill that gap.
Jo, I hope you've kept them.
No, Niki, I didn't. When I passed the 10-year mark of being cancer-free, I went through a very private ritual, a very necessary ritual for myself, where I burned them, and I released the fear that comes with that diagnosis, and I decided to live in faith and to accept that I am here to raise her myself, and she's not going to need these letters.
Wow. Jo, what were the doctors telling you about the prognosis? You went into theatre immediately.
Well, the interesting thing is that when I was first sent to a vascular surgeon, I was still treated a little bit like a hysterical female. It was very much, some people live with this kind of condition for years. You have 2 lumps, but they may or may not turn into anything. We could monitor the situation. But seeing as how you're rather hysterical, as is your family, we'll do you a favor and we'll put you into the surgery list. And when the diagnosis came through 2 days later, it was very much, we were right to take them out. They were malignant. So
wow.
I think that generally in the medical profession, women are too easily diagnosed as being hysterical or emotional. And we know our bodies. We know when something's wrong. And we know when we're just not pulling ourselves together or not. So we got that diagnosis, and I was very, very blessed. When my doctor first explained to me that I had the good cancer, I couldn't comprehend that. I didn't understand that there was a good cancer or a bad cancer.
Meaning it responds well to treatment?
Well, meaning that it was fully encapsulated and that there was a surgical result.
Okay.
It wasn't a cancer that had spread. It being fully encapsulated meant that it could be surgically removed, meaning that I was extraordinarily blessed and didn't have to go through months or years of chemo and radiation treatment. Sure. So I had a surgical result, hence him calling it a good cancer, because it was encapsulated. However, had it spread, had I left it longer, had I not acted sooner, the first place it would have spread to was the lungs. And once it's in the lungs, it's a lot more difficult to deal with, and the prognosis is not as positive.
Now, Jo, yours is such a good story, because you talk about early detection and you talk about it was the best case scenario. Yes, you had to go in for surgery, but you have friends and family that you've lost to cancer, and we've been focusing on breast cancer, and to specifically breast cancer, because of not getting there in time, that early detection not happening.
Well, Niki, this is why it is so important. So I'm just so grateful that you've given me this opportunity, because I have a big mouth and I'm willing to use it when it comes to this issue.
Yes, please.
Cancer does kill 1 in 8 women in South Africa, breast cancer. And there is no reason for that. Because all the other cancers, I think of them as thieves in the night. And I imagine all the cells in my body as being, guys on white horses with white hats. And we often find lumps and bumps in our bodies that we tend to ignore. We see what's going to happen with them. Now, at some point, during the middle of a braai, or during the middle of a work day, or during the middle of you having a conversation with your teenager, or falling in love, those guys on white horses with white hats somehow put black hats on and climb onto black horses. Somehow that lump goes from benign to malignant, and it doesn't give you a memo. It doesn't give you a warning. Now, that's what I want people to understand, is that no lump is acceptable. No lump, because you get no warning about when it's going to turn into one of the bad guys. Now, all of these other cancers, and I have lost so many family members to various kinds of cancers, friends, colleagues. I have dear friends right now who are fighting themselves, or who have, in the one case, both a mother and an aunt currently fighting. Another one's best friend is fighting. I feel surrounded by women who are in this war. And most other cancers in the body, you don't find out you have it until it's too late, until the symptoms become problematic enough for you to go to a doctor and say chronic pain, or diarrhea, or vomiting, or extreme weight loss, or severe headaches. So it's only really when the symptoms become problematic that we approach doctors. breast cancer is the one cancer we can get the jump on. All it requires is us to becoming literally in touch with our bodies, getting our hands on our boobs, and doing breast self-examination without cringing with embarrassment or fear or vulnerability or any of those other things that women hold on to. We can do a breast examination once a week in the privacy of our own home. We don't need money to go to a doctor. The poorest of the poor can do this.
Do you do it, Jo? Do you do it regularly?
Weekly.
Do you?
I do it weekly. I call it, if you will allow me to say it on air, I call it making a right tit of myself for cancer. I get my hands on my body and I make sure I know what my breasts feel like so that the moment anything in them changes, I will be aware of that change. Whether it's a lump or a bump, whether it's a rash around the nipple, these are all warning signs. Whether there is a change in the shape or color of the nipples, whether there is flaking skin on the nipple or the breast, all of these are warning signs. And the breast self-examination is so simple, and there is no reason why we aren't all doing it. It should be like the Macarena.
But you know, Jo,
something that happens without us thinking.
You're so right. You know, you just said I put my hands on my body, and I just wonder how many people put their hands on their bodies.
Well,
how many people really know their bodies? Because there's so many associations with that, aren't there?
You see, I mean, we've got to turn playing with yourself into a good thing. Okay, and we're all taught different things depending on the culture and the religion we're raised with. But when it comes to breast cancer, get over it. I did a breast cancer speech about a week ago, and I was going through the breast self-examination with the ladies, and we were having a lot of laughter doing it. And one lady came up to me afterwards and said, there is just no ways I can do that. I am dying with embarrassment. And I said to her, ma'am, if that is how you feel, then you may well just die of embarrassment.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for that, because you can do this in the privacy of your own home, in your own bathroom. No one needs to see you doing it. Or, if you're in a fabulous partnership, I'm pretty sure your partner pays more attention to your breasts than you do. Make that partner part of the examination.
Yeah.
Do it together. And if you are too embarrassed and you are a shy, dignified lady, then do it on your own in the bathroom with the bathroom door closed. But you can do this in the shower, in the bath, or lying in bed before you go to sleep.
I hope that message, I really hope that message comes through strongly. And, you know, I think that part of the reason is the touching of self and touching the body.
Agreed.
And also people are filled with fear in case they find something. And if there is a slight something, you know, it's moving the hand away very quickly and hoping that it was something that they didn't feel. So I think all of those and through, you know, these awareness months and these kind of discussions, hopefully people will realize the importance once again of the early detection. Jo, I wanted to ask you, I mean, the person that you were before you got your cancer and the person that you are today, are there changes in the person?
Absolutely, Niki. I've always said that I would never ever wish the experience of cancer on my worst enemy, but I would wish the learning of it on my dearest friend, because it changed my priorities and my values overnight.
How so?
Well, I stopped sweating the small stuff. I stopped getting involved in things that took energy from me, that drained me. I stopped spending time with people who didn't enrich my life, who I didn't feel enriched by. I started concentrating more on being able to make a difference in the community that I was in, the kind of relationship I wanted to be in, the kind of mother I wanted to be. Started really focusing on who I wanted to be, the kind of life I really wanted to live. I stopped putting things off for tomorrow that I could do today, and started focusing 100% on the day that I die. Am I going to be able to look back with pride or with regret? Am I going to be able to say, it's okay, honey, you did the best of what you had? So that changed for me overnight. It really did. We put an enormous amount of energy into worrying about what other people think. Well, what they think of us in our friendships and our work environment. In a way, I was released from that, because for me it became about what I think about myself, and whether I'm able to face myself in the mirror. And as my gorgeous daughter so wisely said to me, Mummy, those who know, you know, those people who care know, and those people who don't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So she kind of really epitomized what I experienced when she was only 8 months old. Those who mind matter, and those who don't. It's that simple. So I stopped living my life for other people, not in an unselfish way. In fact, I became more dedicated to charity work, etc., etc. But sort of involved myself in the school community as much as I could, chose my charities wisely, and then gave them everything I had. Whereas before, I'd always had an attitude of, there's always tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's always tomorrow. You know what? I'll get involved with that next year. I'll get involved with that. Cancer Shave-a-thon sounds like a good idea. I'll do that next year. It started for me becoming live it now, do it now, realize it now.
I suppose when you get into the headspace, as you were describing, holding your 8-month-old baby and realizing that you may not be there for her, changes things. You literally see things differently after something like that.
It's a horrific moment. It really was, and it's one that will haunt me for life. But I won't allow to define me for life. I did have the good cancer, and I did have a blessed journey and an easy journey compared to most people. But I do just want to hammer home this message of don't ignore the bumps. I was working the Cancer Shave-a-thon earlier this year, and I'll never forget that a very, very beautiful young woman in her early 20s came to me and pulled me aside at one point and clearly didn't want to speak in front of other people, and said to me, how serious is this? Because I have a big lump that's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's a discharge from my nipple. And I was absolutely horrified to realize that at that stage I was looking at someone who was possibly in a stage of the cancer at which there was very little left to be able to be done. And I'd said to her, how long has this been there? And she said, for over a year. And I remember that I started crying. And I couldn't believe that she'd allowed this to happen for this long. And I said to her, why haven't you gone to the doctor? And she said to me, because I was too scared of the answer.
Yeah.
And to be too scared of the answer could be signing your own death certificate. Rather be paranoid than grieving.
Such important messages, Jo. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really, really do hope that, our listeners today are really going to take cognizance of that very strong message that came across.
So thank you, Niki. Thank you for letting me be a big mouth. Ladies, put your hands on yourselves. Take your lives in your own hands, please.
So true. Jo, thank you. And thanks for your time. And thanks for sharing your story. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Jo Da Silva, she's on a shoot at the moment, very busy schedule. So taking time to share the personal story, and she's very passionate about speaking out and that early detection, which I think is so important. Now, in a moment, I am going to be talking to someone from Cancer, the Cancer Association of South Africa. We're going to be looking at early detection. We're going to look at what the increased risks of breast cancer and other cancers are. And then I'm going to be talking to a gynecologist. We're going to be talking about that BRCA1, that genetic predisposition. We heard about Angelina Jolie having that elective double mastectomy. So I'll be chatting to Dr. Copenhagen in a moment. But we do have a guest who's come into the studio who we're going to talk to while we're waiting for cancer, who's also going to very generously share her personal journey with us. I chatted to her yesterday, and I just think it's such a phenomenal story, and these stories need to be shared. You need to hear that perhaps you're not alone, or what other people are going through. It's not isolated. And again, through the stories, there is the connection, and it's a great story, and I hope you're going to be inspired by it. So Desiree Firer, welcome to the studio, and thank you very, very much also for making time to be here.
My pleasure. I hope that what I have to say will help other people say what they have to do.
So Desiree, we're going back a few years, but going back before your breast cancer, your battle against breast cancer, what was breast cancer? When you had October month and everyone was walking around with those pink little ribbons, did it have any meaning, any significance at all?
Well, mine is a particularly strange story because my late father had a breast cancer, a left breast cancer, and when I was pregnant with my third child, he passed away. But he was 80
from the breast cancer.
No, he was 84 years of age. He had the breast cancer for about 14 years prior to that.
Which is so uncommon, breast cancer in a man.
Completely. It was a left breast lump, and he had a single breast mastectomy. It had infiltrated into his lymph system. So he had radiation and he had chemotherapy. I had experienced my father going through this, and swollen arms from the lymph that had been, the flow had been compromised by scar tissue from the mastectomy. So I'd watched my dad, but he died at 84, 14 years after diagnosis and the mastectomy. But my gynecologist said to me, look, you're approaching 40, and I suggest that after you deliver this baby, being my third baby, you should go and have the BRCA gene testing done.
Because of your father?
Correct.
Right.
So, and the fact that I was pregnant with my third daughter. So not only was it a worry for me, but the fact that I've got 3 daughters, if I carried the gene, would be carrying the gene possibly too. So I went off to the Donald Gordon, to the genetic testing center. They were fantastic. They said to me, we will never give the results over the phone. Whether you're negative or positive, we'll call you in and we will give you the results. And the professor I dealt with was an extraordinarily lovely lady. Anyway, I had the tests and I got the phone call, Des, will you please come in? We've got your results. So I went in, and as I walked in the door, she grinned. She had this big grin on her face and she said, don't worry, Desi, you are completely BRCA free. She said, you do not carry the BRCA gene.
And you had been tested?
I had been fully tested, and this was the result, that I do not carry the BRCA gene. My father must have had a random cancer. But I'm BRCA A, and BRCA 1 and BRCA 2 negative.
Okay.
So I felt completely reassured. 17 months later, I gave birth to my 4th child, my little boy. So now I was sitting with 4 magnificent children, and completely reassured that I'd been for the BRCA test, and I was negative on both BRCA 1 and BRCA 2.
So you, and clear, I mean, you thought, well, that's absolutely fantastic. Had up until that point, did you do self-examinations?
Nothing, not a jot.
Okay.
And I was BRCA free, so I thought, well, there's no need to worry, and go ahead and nation build, as I was involved in doing in terms of my kids. And then my son was born, and shortly before his first birthday, I had come home from a run, and I was lying in the bath, and I was soaping my armpits and my body, and I felt something. I felt a hard lump, the side of my left breast. And
what did you think? Did you get that icy cold feeling?
I did. In my stomach, I got an icy cold feeling, but I thought, you know what? It could be a blocked milk duct. It could be a mastitis. My son's not even a year old. He's 17 months younger than my daughter, and then I've got 2 older daughters. I thought, so it's a mastitis. It's a blocked milk duct. But so I had a bath, got dressed, went to work, but I had a nagging feeling that it's just not worth leaving it. And the next day after a run, I got in the shower and I felt, and it hadn't moved.
It was still there.
It was still there.
How did it feel? Hard, soft,
hard,
small?
I can't remember my reaction to the size of it, but it was present.
But it was hard, okay.
Its presence spoke.
Okay.
The size or the depth or I can't remember those details.
Right.
But I thought, you know what, my gynecologist, bless him forever, I don't know if I can mention doctors' names on radio.
Of course, mention.
Dr. Boris Jevkov. And he had delivered Livia, my 3rd daughter, when my father passed away. And he was the one who said to me, go for genetic testing. He said, it's, you've never had a lump, but your father had an uncommon cancer, go and check. And when I came back, I CC'd him on the results. He even said to me, thank God, BRCA free, and I said, I'm going on to have another child. That sort of amazed him, considering that I was like now 40 years old. But anyway,
and you look fantastic. But anyway,
thank you. And I had my little boy, so I have no regrets at all. Anyway, so I went for a test. I went to a mammographer, and I had my first mammogram ever, because I was now 40. And by the end of the mammogram, the mammographer had given it to the doctor, and he called me in and he said, my dear, you have a calcification in your left breast. And I said, meaning what? I had things to do. It was Friday afternoon, 1 o'clock. I had things to do. What does a calcification mean? And he said, I need to biopsy that calcification ASAP.
Okay.
So I said, do it now. I phoned my husband. I said, fetch the kids from school. I told him the story. He said, I'll take off work. I'll fetch the kids from school and I'll be there as soon as I can. And they did the biopsy. And it was a very, very difficult Friday afternoon, Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday morning, I took 2 of my kids to a party at Drake's Farmyard, and my cell phone went off, and it was the doctor, the radiologist.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just amazed that he had taken the time and the attention to phone me on a Sunday morning after biopsying me on the Friday. And he said, I'm afraid it's malignant. He said, you have breast cancer.
On the phone,
On the
at
phone.
a party.
At a party.
This is what you hear.
And that, I saw my children in the bunny hutch and my other children on the apparatus.
Oh,
and I
that's
thought, no. This can't be. I'm BRCA free. You know, it's just...
You did the test.
I did the test 3.5 years ago. You're telling me, or 3 years ago, you're telling me 3 years later that I have a breast cancer. I'm BRCA free. And he said, yes, we're just waiting for further results to see whether the tumor is HER2 positive or not. HER2 positive means it's susceptible to estrogen and progesterone, to hormones. And it came back HER2 positive. I didn't know if that was better or worse. I've heard subsequently that a HER2 positive diagnosis is, in a sense, inverted commas, better because there is a direct treatment by prohibiting the production of estrogen and progesterone and estriols and androgens in the body, which can, subsequent to the mastectomy, ward off a recurrence because you're not producing the hormones that feed into the tumor.
Mm-hmm.
I was diagnosed 4 days before Raphael's first birthday, and I had the mastectomy the day after Raphael's first birthday.
Oh, goodness.
But, you know, all I can say is thank God, and I'm really a walking success story because I was treated by a symphony of surgeons. From the surgeon who did the mastectomy to, which is Dr. Alan Wolowitz, to the doctor who performed the reconstruction, because it was a single breast mastectomy. He had a huge job. He had to match one to the other. And Dr. Marshall Murdoch at the Donald Gordon he's a maestro. I mean, the man is an architect. So when I'd finished a year of chemo, after the mastectomy, 3 months later I started a regimen of chemotherapy. Because it had not metastasized and it had not gone into my lymph system, thank God, they had caught it in stage 1 and removed it. So, and they removed what's called the sentinel node in my breast. It's the sentinel node feeds the nipple, feeds the breast, and it was cancer free. So it was very, very lucky. I didn't need radiation, but I did have 17 doses, 1 year, every 3 weeks. Sure. Of chemotherapy.
Now listen, I want to come back and talk about the treatment and the therapy because there are people who are going through treatment or who have to go through, and I really want to talk and walk through that cool. whole process with you. Do we have someone from the Cancer Association? I do believe we do. Just to very quickly talk to a representative from the Cancer Association. I think it's Dorothy Duploy that I have on the line. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
Thank you, Dorothy, for joining us. I'm sure you were listening to Desiree's story, just sharing. What a scary story, Dorothy. And this is, October, and it is the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I wanted to ask you, just very, very briefly, I mean, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Is this month of breast cancer awareness working? Are you going into people's homes? Are you going into schools? Are you going into workplaces, communities? Are women waking up and going for the tests? Is it helping with early detection?
Yes, it definitely does. October being Pink Month, lots of awareness around breast cancer, which is really aiding in the awareness in the communities. We do find in our deep rural communities there's still the myths and the ignorance, and so we're working on that with awareness and going into the homes of those women that we specifically target, women on farms with our mobile clinics. And in your urban areas, the awareness and the stories that I've just been listening to the survivors coming forward and telling how their journey has been during this month and right throughout the year creates a sense of, I'm needing to take notes, I'm needing to go for testing, I'm needing to do my breast self-examination, etc. And linking that with pap smear works well because it's both women's cancers. So we've done a lot of work now in October around awareness raising.
Are there statistics? I mean, I was looking at some statistics, frightening statistics by 2030, just the increase of something like 78%. I mean, what are the reasons for that? Is it lifestyle? Why are more women getting breast cancer?
It could be, I think when we chatted to the Department of Health, who is responsible for the cancer registry in South Africa, one of the reasons was that because of the awareness raising, etc., there's more women coming forward, and so they are being tested where previously a lot of women were dying before they got for treatment. So, and they weren't captured because it's absolutely laboratory-based testing that gets put on the stats. So that could be one reason. It could also be a lot of westernized lifestyle with so many more women having to work and having to, not go the route of slow cooking and lifestyle issues and that. So that there's two reasons why the stats is high. One is that there's more testing being done and more awareness raising, and women is coming forward earlier and men are coming forward earlier for early diagnosis, and also the westernized way of lifestyle, which is kind of a lot of South Africans with working, with having to go out and earn a living, has kind of migrated to westernized lifestyle, which puts you at risk for breast cancer.
So the message for that came through strongly in October, and the message for women listening now, what is the strong message?
The message is be aware of your risk. I've listened to the survivor talking now about her risk with a father. So your risk increases if there's somebody in the family that's got breast cancer. To always do your monthly self-examination. To go, if you're picking up any abnormalities, doesn't matter how small, to have it go and checked out, because rather be safe than to not know and to succumb to this disease.
Dorothy, thank you very much. We appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
bye-bye.
bye.
Dorothy Duploy, Executive Manager for the Southern Business Unit of Cancer. And if you have just tuned in, welcome. It's Conversations with Niki. I'm Niki Seberini. It's great to be with you. And we're talking about cancer. We're focusing specifically on breast cancer. We're listening to survivors' stories and really hoping that through the stories you are going to perhaps take action. Maybe you have felt a lump and maybe you have ignored that lump, and I'm really hoping that you're going to take the next step, go to your doctor, and if you're too afraid to examine yourself, to go to a doctor who can examine you. And I really let this be a wake-up call, this show today. I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, 90.3 in Plet, that's 90.3 MC in Plet, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM, and Bay FM. Lovely to have you. Thank you so much. In a moment, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Copenhagen, gynecologist. We're going to be looking at the genetic predisposition to getting breast cancer, and that is the BRCA1 and the BRCA2. And I have in the studio Desiree Firer, who is sharing her story of really her battle against her breast cancer. So Desiree, we will chatting. We'll wait for Dr. Copenhagen to join us, because he's going to be focusing on those. Because for those people who have missed so far, your father had breast cancer, which is very unusual in males. And your doctor thought, well, maybe because he had breast cancer, he was a BRCA1 carrier of this gene. And you went for all the genetic testing, and it came out
Negative.
negative.
But when I spoke to the professor subsequent to diagnosis, and I said to her, but you told me I was BRCA gene free, she said, Des, we found BRCA1, and then we found BRCA2. She said there might be other genetic mutations, might be other genetic anomalies that we'll pick up in the future. It's work in progress.
Okay.
It's not a definitive, it's not a closed study. It's it's work in progress. At first they found BRCA1 and then BRCA2,
Right.
and there's nothing to say that doing investigations into certain communities like Ashkenazi Jews or Eastern European communities, that they're not going to pick up other BRCAs, and I have to live with that. It could have been a random cancer. My father's was a random cancer. I'm genetically tested and negative, and yet I got it.
Well, what is interesting is when we look at the BRCA1 and we look at the BRCA2 is if you go for the genetic testing and you find that you have that, will you opt for the preventative mastectomy? I mean, we all heard of Angelina Jolie at the beginning of the year, who underwent this preventable double mastectomy because doctors discovered that she carried this faulty gene, the BRCA1, and apparently she had an estimate, roughly an 87% risk of contracting breast cancer, and so it was recommended that she have this mastectomy, and she went ahead and she did it, and apparently she has inspired women from all over the world to be tested, and some who have taken that step. So I have Dr. Copenhagen on the line just to expand and perhaps explain in a little bit more detail how that works. Dr. Copenhagen, thank you very much for joining us.
Niki, hi, thank you, it's a pleasure.
Dr. Copenhagen, I've got Desiree Firer in the studio, and we've just been talking about her story. But perhaps for those of our listeners, no, that's fine. You know, she was just saying that her father had breast cancer, and she was tested. She went for the genetic testing, and it came out negative, and yet she still got breast cancer.
Was her father tested?
No, he wasn't. But
because that's the ideal. You test the person with the cancer.
Okay.
And when a male gets a breast cancer, that's often a pretty good indication that there's a BRCA1 or BRCA2.
Okay. But she was free. But could it miss her?
Yeah, you got if one of your parents is a carrier of a mutated BRCA gene, then you have a 50% chance of inheriting that mutation.
Okay. So would that mean, Desiree, for example, your daughters would then go for the testing?
Well, I would suggest that they do. I came back completely BRCA-free 3 years before diagnosis. So whether my father was a BRCA carrier or a random cancer, or whether it missed me, or I was a random cancer, I think that's just part of scientific study in progress. But I would very much recommend that my 3 daughters do go for testing when they're of an age. And my brother possibly has the 50% chance as well, and he has 2 daughters, and I think they should be apprised of the fact, and a recommendation should be made more for vigilance than for immediate testing.
Yeah,
Dr. Copenhagen, how does it work? Perhaps you can just explain how this works.
There are a number of genes in the body that we call tumor suppressor genes. In other words, their function is to prevent cancers from developing. And amongst these is BRCA1 and 2. It's a misnomer. BRCA means breast cancer, but these particular genes also prevent cancer in the ovary and in various other organs, fallopian tubes, colon, etc., etc.
Okay.
Now they release proteins that repair damaged DNA, and that's the function. If there's a mutation, a change in these genes, then that protein may not be sufficiently active. There may not be sufficient of the protein. So in fact now that suppressive effect on breast cancer or ovarian cancer is decreased, and there is an exponential increase in the incidence of breast cancer and ovary. And maybe I can tell you, because in fact the latest figures, I don't know where Angelina Jolie got her 87% from, but the latest figures, the really latest figures, that's from the last 2 months, it will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. The average woman in the street has got a breast cancer risk in her lifetime. That means right throughout her life of about 12%. So any woman walking around the street may have a 12% risk of breast cancer. If she's a carrier of BRCA1 mutation, then her risk is 60%, not 87. That's on average, 60 to 65. BRCA2, her risk is 45%. When it comes to ovaries, the average woman in the street has a risk of 1.5% of a lifetime risk for ovarian cancer. If she's BRCA1, that becomes 40%, and if she's BRCA2, 15%. But other cancers also may be affected, so it's not only the breasts and the ovaries. It's fallopian tubes in women, for example. There's a condition called primary peritoneal ovarian cancer. The lining of the abdomen comprises cells that are multi-potential. In other words, they can grow into any kind of cells, and they're not infrequently may grow into ovarian tissue. So although the woman's had a prophylactic oophorectomy, her ovaries have been removed, her uterus has been removed, she can still get cancer of the lining of the abdomen, and that's called primary peritoneal cancer. She can get colon cancer more commonly, pancreas cancer more commonly, and if she's BRCA2, melanoma. And people often don't know that you need to see your dermatologist and have your skin checked. Males, if they have this, have a risk of breast cancer, more so with BRCA2 than with BRCA1, interestingly. But pancreas as well, colon, prostate, and melanoma if they're BRCA2. So it involves a whole host of things.
So then having the elective mastectomy or having ovaries removed is that the way to go?
Well, if one deals with people who have got this, first of all, it's important to realize that these cancers, by their very nature, tend to occur at a much younger age than most cancers occur. Okay. So women who are BRCA1 or 1 or 2 gene mutation positive will get their breast cancers before the age of 40 very often. So that's a problem in itself, because getting it that early, you're having to have what is literally a mutilating operation at a fairly young stage. But these are people who have young children, and they need to stay alive for their children. And there is very little doubt that doing the surgery decreases the risk. It doesn't completely absolve you of the risk, but it decreases the risk very significantly of getting it. So they used to say, and I'm not sure these figures are totally entirely correct, that if you have a bilateral mastectomy and oophorectomy, remove ovaries and breasts, your risk of breast cancer then, if you're BRCA1 mutation positive, is about the same as the risk of the woman in the street who doesn't have it.
Okay.
And that makes a massive difference, because it extends your life, your ability to look after your family. Interestingly, probably the better thing to do, and where I think Angelina Jolie was incorrectly advised, is that they normally would take out, if they're only going to do one set of operations, they would normally remove the ovaries first.
Why is that?
Because when ovaries are removed, the risk of breast cancer is decreased.
Really?
Yeah. So in a place like Israel, for example, which are probably the world experts on this, they would often tend to remove ovaries first. There are other things you can do. When you're young, you can use prophylactic. What's it called? Prophylactic chemotherapy. In other words, you take tamoxifen, which is the substance that we use in women who've had breast cancer, one of the things we use to treat them, or a thing called raloxifene, and both of those will decrease the risk of breast cancer. Interestingly, oral contraceptives used over more than 5 years will decrease the risk of ovarian cancer in BRCA carriers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dr. Copenhagen, so for people listening, are they all going to phone their doctors now and say, I'd like to go for some genetic testing?
Well, that's the problem, because people tend to get very, very panic-stricken. There are guidelines as to who should be tested. First of all, if there's a family history of multiple breast or ovarian cancer, then those people need to be tested. In other words, if there are a lot of people within the same family who've had breast or ovarian cancer. The second thing is if an individual has more than one primary cancer. In other words, cancer in both breasts or cancer in a breast and an ovary at the same time, pretty much certain that's BRCA. A person who gets breast cancer at a very early age or ovarian cancer, that needs to be tested. Males who get breast cancer need to be tested. And the important thing is to, wherever possible, test the person who's got the cancer, because that's the person who should have the gene. If the person with the cancer doesn't have the gene, it means they don't have the gene that we're testing for. And as I came in right at the end, I think I heard somebody say that there are genes we don't know about. We know there are other genes, we just haven't discovered them, and they are occurring all the time. So there are other BRCA genes. There are BRCA genes, for example, in the Afrikaans population that came from Holland. They brought with them a BRCA mutation, different to the Ashkenazi Jewish mutation. There is one in Norway, in Iceland, Among the black population, there's some BRCA mutations which are different. So there can be different mutations. When they look for a specific mutation. They can't look at all of them, it's just too expensive. So when they've got a whole group of people with one mutation, then that's the mutation they would look for generally. So if you've got, the most important thing is if you feel that there is something in the family that may worry you, then the first thing to do is not to go to your GB, but to go to a genetic counselor. The genetic counselors know exactly what's going on. They're great. They will sit down, they will explain to you, you need to go with a family tree of all the people in the family who've had cancers of whatever type. You come with all the stories that they can work this out, and they'll say to you, look, your risk is extremely remote. It isn't necessary to go to the expense of doing this test, or your risk is high. We need to do the test. And then when the answer to the test comes out, you go back to the same counselor, you sit down, and the counselor says to you, you are a carrier or you are not a carrier. But you need to be in the presence of somebody who knows how to handle the shock or the glee of the answer.
I hear you. Dr. Copenhagen, thank you. Thank you for explaining that so clearly and for your time. Much appreciated.
It's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you, and you too. Bye-bye. Dr. Copenhagen, gynecologist. Just clarifying how the BRCA 1 and BRCA 2 work. So Desiree, there you were. You had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And what was the prognosis at that stage?
Thank God, very, very good, because
even though you went for chemotherapy for a year and 17 treatments, I mean,
well, it is a lot. But I was part of a test that is under the auspices of the American Drug Federation. But it was when I understood that I had to go for chemotherapy, I was under the impression it was prophylactic too, because they had removed the tumor and it hadn't infiltrated the sentinel node and it hadn't infiltrated the lymph system. They removed nothing.
So surely that's a good sign. I mean,
yes, thank God. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So I thought the chemotherapy was prophylactic, and it could go either way. I mean, I'm glad I had it, because I'll tell you how I understand chemotherapy, and ladies out there who are going for chemotherapy, one thing I ask of you is, do not see chemotherapy as the enemy. Do not see it as J's fluid being pumped through your veins. It is your ally. It is not your enemy. And look, you understand that I'm into my 40s now. So when I was younger and computers first came out, we had a game called Pac-Man on the computer. And this little Pac-Man walked around the screen munching up all the aliens. That's very much what chemotherapy is. That you sit for 6 hours on an IV, very uncomfortable, especially if they blow your veins before they find one. And what gets pumped into you are a series of little Pac-Men. And they run around your body munching up mutated cells and munching up fast-growing cells. That's their job. So where our white, and I'm no medical practitioner, so I do stand to be corrected. This is from a personal understanding. Where your white blood cells, your army, fail to do the job because they're overwhelmed or because they're compromised, so the chemotherapy comes in as a series of Pac-Men marching around the body, and they eat up any fast-growing cell, because a fast-growing cell is an anomaly. Cells divide and do their job in a particular time. The cancer cells are fast-growing cells, so they mutate at a rapid rate or a faster rate. And the Pac-Men, the chemotherapy drug, walks around eating all the aliens. They can't discriminate with fast-growing cells whether it's a mutant
a good
cell,
one or a bad one, so to speak.
Yes, correct. So they munch up the good with the bad. So yes, your nails take a battering, toenails and fingernails. That's why you lose your hair, because they're fast-growing hair cells. So the chemo eats up the fast-growing cell. Eyebrows are lost. Eyelashes are lost. I looked like a reptile. I was reptilian. I had no eyelashes. I had no eyebrows. I had no hair. And it wasn't a threat, because I knew once the chemo...
So you had the right attitude.
I saw this little army of chemo for 17 doses being pumped into me, and they were saying to me, Des, there is no plan B. You have 4 children. your youngest is at that stage after the chemotherapy was 2. I mean, when I finished the chemo, there was no plan B, and this was my ally. So if it ate up my fingernails and the epithelial lining of your uterus, so it puts you into premature menopause. That is one of the downsides, but you can't think of falling pregnant during chemo anyway. But the chemo does put you into menopause, because as the ovulatory cycle works, the lining thickens, and then if there's no fertilization, so it comes away as a menstrual cycle. So the chemotherapy, the Pac-Men munch that up too, but nothing is irreversible. You know,
I mean, you're sitting here, let me just say, because you're sitting here opposite me, you're this petite woman, and you're just gorgeous, and you're full of life, and, you know, the thought that you've battled, this cancer, and that you went through this chemotherapy for a year, 17 sessions of it, you're just a walking example, and I wish I could take a picture, and I wish that listeners could just see, because they would be so encouraged and so inspired, really.
You make me feel very attractive, and I like that. Thank you.
You're lovely.
Because I've been in a place where I felt terribly unattractive.
I can imagine.
Very unattractive, where one doesn't want to, somebody going through chemotherapy, as much as you want to pile on the makeup and have all the treatments, the truth is you carry a yellow color, and you are wan, and you are hairless, and it's not nice, but nothing is irreversible. Just to say to people out there that I started chemotherapy in October 2009, and I finished, I think it was the 7th of October, and I finished on the 14th of October 2010. During that whole process, I was lopsided because I chose not to have the reconstruction before or during chemotherapy.
Why is that?
Because I wanted to give my body a chance to work on
Recover
one thing at a time,
right.
and that was the chemo. And I was private for that year, in terms of we were quite a family where my daughters did bath with me. Remember, my son was a baby, so whether he bathed with me or not was irrelevant, because he wasn't physiologically aware of anything.
And they ask questions? I mean, they could see.
Yes, my daughters are very much part and parcel of the E-generation, the electronic generation, and they see billboards and models and magazines, although we do keep them in quite a private, cloistered environment from the cultural and religious background that I come from, but we don't keep them in blinkers. So they did see a change. I was more private, but I turned away rather than said, "You can't come into the bathroom."
Yes.
And I still swam in a costume, but I made sure that I used some kind of costume that kind of covered me. What happened?
And you looking at you?
I found myself an interesting specimen to look at. When I lost my hair, our housekeeper, our domestic worker who was with us for 17 years, unfortunately she retired, and we still miss her to this day, and I speak to her on the phone. But what happened was I lost all my hair bar one little. I had very long hair, one long strand, sort of a couple of strands, and she used to call me the Chinese, because I had this bald pate with a long tress. I never allowed my children to see me bald. I wore hats, I wore snoods, I wore head coverings. I'm a runner, so I wore a hat anyway. Which brings me to something else, that when I finished the chemotherapy in October 2010, I had the reconstruction in 2011, January. You have to wait 3 months. And Dr. Murdoch gave me what's called the gold standard of reconstruction. I chose not to go for the inserts, the silicone implants.
Yes.
I had what's called a tram flap. That's a transverse rectus abdominal muscle flap.
You sound like a doctor just by
No.
the way.
They slit down. You have a 6-pack in your abdomen. So what they do is they slit down the middle of the 6-pack, and they slit the one half off your leg. So you've literally got a 3-pack and a hanging 3-pack. And they allow it to become blood rich, and 3 weeks later they flip it up into the breast cavity.
Wow.
So my left breast reconstruction is actually reconstructed from my transverse rectus abdominal muscle.
That is
it belongs
incredible.
to me.
Incredible.
Dr. Murdoch, as I said, I had a symphony of surgeons. The plastic surgeon said to me he had never seen such a good mastectomy because so much flesh was left to work with. And the radiographer and the radiologist every year with my mammogram say to me, I've never seen such a beautiful reconstruction. So, Baruch Hashem, I'm very blessed. I think we're running out of time.
We are, and I wish we could carry on
I
talking.
just want to say one thing, that after the reconstruction at the beginning of 2011, I got back on the road, and in March 2012, I ran the Jerusalem Marathon, a sub 5-hour marathon, and the same year in June, I ran the Comrades Marathon. Not a brilliant time, but a very respectable time of 11 and a half hours. And I've carried on running. And subsequent to that, I rode the 94.7, which I am doing in 2 weeks' time. And that's it. You know what? Chemo takes it out of you and life puts it back. Your hair, your eyebrows, your eyelashes, even the weight you lost, you regain. And the hair on your legs comes back. And so does your strength and your vitality and your ability to go out there and live. And that's what you have to do.
A story of hope, a story of inspiration, and I hope that our listeners have been inspired. You are an inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
If I can give help to any of your listeners who are going through a hard time, I will leave my cell phone number with you.
And they can contact me via my website.
They can contact you, and perhaps you can get hold of me. But there are a lot of success stories out there, and we need to put that on air. We need to put that out there, that breast cancer is not necessarily a death sentence. It's not. It can be beaten.
Desiree, thank you. Desiree Firer, wonderful, wonderful. If you'd like to get hold of Desiree, do it via the website, www.conversationswithniki.co.za. Just contact me. I'll put you in touch with Desiree. I hope you have been inspired. Look after yourself. Thank you for tuning in. Until next week. Goodbye.
Hi, my name is Desiree Firer, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.